So moving out then of Okonkwo's interior and his exterior, we get this larger sense of the African culture that Achebe is describing for us in Ibu culture. So I want to look at a couple things, and we'll start with religion. So we're dealing here with an agricultural community that prays to agricultural gods. There's a communal sense here that our treatment of the gods has a direct influence on the success or the failure of the land, which is, of course, the key means of success in this community. But there's also personal gods here, described by Achebe here as the chi. So there's that proverb that when a man says yes, his chi says yes also, meaning here's the kind of two-part sense of human success. It's a willingness of the individual person, but it's also this kind of personal God that makes sense of why some people perhaps succeed so much more dramatically than others. So you can work just as hard as somebody else, but perhaps your chi is better than somebody else's. This also, of course, gives two possible reasons for failure. One, that's a self justification. Well, my chi is bad, so I didn't succeed. And one also that just says, well, you didn't work hard enough. You must not have said yes when your chi said yes, and so that's why you fail. And in that sense, you see perhaps some patriarchal senses of human success, which we'll see Okonkwo, of course, having to deal with more intimately when we get a little further in the book. So superstition is also a huge part of this. It's connected to this oral culture here that prides itself on legends and on fables. And so anything from as small as not calling a snake at night, but referring it to a stick as well, which seems relatively innocuous, to, in the middle of part one, this very, very horrible superstition that Okonkwo's wife, Egwifi, comes to experience. This is the Agbanji, which is not a unique idea in this book, or even just in Ibu culture or Nigerian culture. This idea of a wicked spirit child who continues to afflict the womb of a mother who gives birth to either a dead child or whose child dies shortly after birth is a common story in a lot of African literature. And so the way that in which that this is treated in Things Fall Apart, in this horribly sad series of children that Egwifi has to bury, is that eventually they begin to mutilate these baby corpses, which is horrible, and they don't bury them properly and throw them out into the evil forest. And then finally, when Nzima comes along, they're able to find this Iwiua, which is a stone that forms a link between an Agbanji and the spirit world, and put an end to this. You can read into this a huge sense of here's an explanation for why so many children die close to childbirth, why there's such a high infant mortality rate. But in the way that Achebe presents this, it gives some confusion for us because, again, he presents them as equals. Don't call a snake at night is presented in the same way as the mutilation of a dead infant. And there's a sense in which he's just saying, well, here's an objective look at what's happening in this culture. So we talked as well about the evil forest, which becomes a huge part of part two, and that's the place that they give the Christians the plot of land to build their church. This is where Unica is placed because of his disease, and we have a sense of great superstition and great evil in the evil forest. As well in this are the treatment of twins in this story, which is never really fully explained. But as we'll see in a second, this treatment is horrifying and something that has a particular impact on Okonkwo's son, Nowoe. Justice is very, very important in Ibu culture, especially in this book. We've already seen this kind of like exacting eye for an eye kind of justice in the first chapter when there's this woman who's killed in the neighboring village. And as a result, that village has to give both a young virgin and Ikemefuna. We have the sense of the wife being restored in the place of this young virgin and the life being also provided in the person of Ikemefuna. So there's a sense of like there's a justice here. But Achebe opens this up a little bit more with the Egwugwu, who he describes as men who are dressed in these kind of bizarre costumes. So there's a couple ideas here that are worth working through. It's important to recognize that the case that's being tried here is about a man who beats his wife. and her brothers have come to say we need to take her away because her husband is beating her so severely, and he's reprimanded for that, this man who beats his wife. The court says it's not bravery when a man fights a woman, and he's required to make restitution of a kind. And so what you see here in this justice system is a system of self-rule that goes back through all kinds of generations to this deep-seated connection to ancestry. When these guys dress up in these costumes and have this formalism, this formal call and response, these costumes that they wear, they are entering into the spirit of the clan. They're entering into the voice of the ancestors. Achebe says, if you watch this carefully, you would see very clearly that one of these guys is a Okonkwo, which gives us this kind of bizarre irony. We know that these aren't actually the spirits of the ancestors, and yet there's something kind of like weirdly mystical and something that's happening here that produces reverence for us. In a similar sense, you could think about the judge in an American court system who on Monday night watches football, but on Tuesday puts on that robe and then stands in front of people and decides who gets to live and who gets to die, or decides, huge consequences for people's lives. He's just an ordinary guy, but when he puts on that robe, he stands for something and he symbolizes something that's much beyond himself. The key here is that these people are trying themselves by their own understanding of justice, and they're trying themselves in accordance with this deep tradition that stands back generation after generation after generation, so that the people in this community can say, well, I'm being tried according to the same rules and the same procedures as my father and my father's father and my father's 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 father, all the way back through the entire community. These are some images of Egugug, and you see these raffia skirts that they wear and these masks that are distinctive. All right, so a brief discussion of women in Igbo culture. Egwuifi here, the mother of Nzima, is given this tremendously tender narration here in towards the end of part 1, in which Achebe narrates the sorrows that she's experiencing in childbirth. She names her children. Death, I implore you, saying, Death, please don't take this one. To the next one, may it not happen again, till finally embracing this kind of despair when she says, Death may please himself, which essentially means, I know this child's going to die, in the sense of resignation there. That's the word. Her relationship with Nzima, though, her child that survives this, is incredibly important. Achebe says there's something in it like the companionship of equals. Nzima calls her mother by her first name, and the two of them depend on one another. Okonkwo, as well, clearly favors Nzima. He says multiple times that she should have been a boy, which means that he sees something of his own fire, his own motivation, his own perseverance in this girl who he has respect for. And so in this bizarre scene that takes place when Chilo, the priestess, comes and takes Nzima in the middle of the night and takes her on her back through the village, you have a couple things that are intriguing. The last time we saw a child be in danger was with Okonkwo and Ikemefuna. And Okonkwo rises to kill Ikemefuna out of his fear of being found to be weak. And in Egwuifi and Nzima's scene, Egwuifi says she's going to do whatever she needs to do to save her child. Standing over that hole where Chilo takes her into the shrine, Egwuifi says that she would take on all the gods if it meant that she could save her daughter. And we see this sense of self-sacrifice here that we haven't really seen so far in this parent-child relationship. Okonkwo was also here. He doesn't stay behind. And again, he brings with him a machete. In this case, though, it's almost to say that he would use this machete to save his child. And we see this small little paragraph that Achebe gives to us about Okonkwo and Egwuifi's life, how Egwuifi was originally married to somebody else because Okonkwo was too poor, and she runs away from him because she doesn't love him anymore, and she knocks on Okonkwo's door in the early hours of the morning, and Okonkwo picks her up and carries her into his room. And there's a tenderness here between the two of them and intimacy that we have not seen in Okonkwo anywhere else in the novel so far. So there's a kind of fully realized image of Egwuifi here as a mother. But then at the same time, this is juxtaposed to this wedding that's taking place in which arrangements are being made for this daughter that she has no say over, as these two families barter over the bride price. And if you read closely, there's this sort of sad assumption that at one point this young woman is asked to take off her clothing in front of a group of men so that there can be an almost product-like to treat her as a product, and that they're making sure that they're getting the things that they're asking for their money. So you have, again, these two things, these two contradictions that Achebe presents us in the same space. Just like with religion, here's something relatively innocuous connected to something that seems very offensive, and in this space as well with women, here's like a very strong image of a woman, and then here's like this very demeaning thing that's happening at the same time. And Achebe's not judging between these two; he's just presenting them to us, and he's saying, "Look at these two things together."